Hello everyone, this is Baddu Spirito and welcome to part 4 of Land Combat and Template Design Guide. I have been sick for the past couple of weeks, so I couldn't do videos, but I'm recovering now, although my voice still hasn't fully recovered, but I think it's good enough to make a video. In this video I will talk about attack and defense modifiers, which is probably some of the which is a really fundamental mechanic, but it's actually probably most overlooked by most single players, like single player people, I think, and even some people who play multiplayer. And you absolutely have to know the modifiers and how to make the best of them if you want to be a good player. And you can see a lot of questions on the forum, like especially from single player people. They, for example, like the guy maybe read a few guides, like maybe he knows some of the basics. He makes a post that says something like, I read this guide and I made these meta templates that I've seen on the internet, but this guy is saying you can wreck through the AI with these templates, but I can't do anything. Like I'm getting wrecked. Like what am I doing wrong? What's going on here? And now there can of course be many reasons like what's going wrong. And one of the most common would be like maybe you're just simply not managing your economy well and you just don't have enough divisions. But this is not an economy guide, so I'm gonna talk about the one of the common causes which is related to land combat mechanics, and that is you don't know how modifiers work, and this can make a massive difference. Now this topic is unfortunately a bit boring to introduce because it requires like a lot of memorization rather than like fun mathematical analysis. But it is quite important and we kind of have to do this. Now I have listed here all the different categories of attack and defense modifiers in the game, which I could think of. Maybe I might be missing something. Like if I'm missing something, leave a comment please, and I can maybe make a update in one of the later videos. But this should I'm probably not forgetting something important. There might be some like obscure thing I'm forgetting, but anyway, essentially let's first see the modifiers in action for a moment here. I'm back to using vanilla here. I'm not using a mod. Now here, when we hover over our soft attack, we see that the soft attack 33.2 is like our final attack value, and the base value 60 is basically what you see on the template. We have this I think is this division. Yeah, it has 60 soft attack, and this is what you see here as the base value. And all the attack modifiers give you some modifier percentage, which says here modified to 55.4% due to all this stuff like below, which are river crossing. Like you got minus 30% river crossing, like plus 25% experience, etc., etc. And now here, like in order to so you see, like to calculate your actual damage, which is 33.2, you have to know about all of these modifiers and how they interact with each other, like what are the sources for these modifiers, etc. And in this video I might actually break this into two parts because this might take too long for one video. I'm going to cover essentially all of the sources for these modifiers and how they stack with each other. Now the first thing you should know is that the things I have listed here are different categories. Like each different line here you will see as a different line here in the UI, in the modify, like below modified to whatever due to line, and each of these different categories stack multiplicatively. So here, for example, let me actually look at this one because it has also an experience modifier. Now, how you calculate that 55.4 is you simply multiply all of those modifiers. Like you see, let's start with 1. I mean, you obviously start with 1 and multiplied with river crossing gives a minus 30% penalty, so you're gonna multiply that with 0.7 times 1.25 times 1.05 0.8 0.5. I think the next one was 1.2 1.2 and finally 1.05, which should give us the modifier here. Yes, I mean there is some like overflow in the calculation, I guess. I mean like numerical like a numerical calculation difference, but it's very small, so it doesn't really matter. Like we calculated 15.6, like 55.6%, and in the game it says 55.4%, so it's like irrelevant difference. It's just a like computational numerical difference. Anyway, this is how you calculate it. Just multiply all the modifiers from different categories. However, there is one other element, like another line to it. Basically, each of these categories might have different sources, like more than one source. Experience only has, like some of them only has one source. For example, experience is simply like the experience level of the division you see here. Like if you're a regular, you get a 25%, like plus 25%. If it's trained, you get nothing. If it's green, you get a minus 25, etc. But some of the bonuses have multiple sources. For example, the counter bonus that you see plus 20% is given by, for example, both this guy, the army offense guy, which gives plus 10% division attack, and this guy, which is giving infantry division attack 10%, and you can see that we have a 20% counter modifier. So modifiers, like different sources of the same category, stack additively, not multiplicatively. This is the important thing you need to know. So this 10% and this 10% don't give you 21%, it gives you 20% because they are additive, not multiplicative. And this is actually a pretty good thing when you are trying to remove like fort modifiers, terrain modifiers, etc., as we will see soon. Now these are the basics. So I'm actually going to cover each of these in detail. I'll probably cover like maybe 10 to 11 of them actually in like the first video, and then do the rest in a second video. Oh, but before I get there, let me show you how huge of a difference it can make in terms of the actual damage you can deal, despite it not seeming that way. Basically, I have made some I've given some values here that I think someone who an inexperienced player might have here, and someone who's like pretty good at the game, knows how the modifiers work and knows how to stack them properly. And if you look at each of these individually, it doesn't seem like a huge difference. Like maybe this guy is using a green division versus this guy is using a trained division. Maybe this guy has 30% playing bonus and this guy has 40%. Maybe this guy has 20% counter modifier and this guy has 30%, etc. But if you add all of these up, basically we get a 50% modifier for this guy and we get a 296% modifier for this guy. And this is not even the whole story, because remember, the critical hits are important. So if I'm attacking, say, with 500 base attack division versus a division that has 500 defense, and I also take the critical damage into account, this guy deals 252 damage, and this guy deals 4.4 thousand damage, which is a difference, like there is like 17 times difference between the two damages. So, you know, if you're asking like why is this guy successful with this template but I can't do anything, it might simply be the case that the guy is dealing 17 times as much damage, like using the same template, just because he's stacking modifiers better than you. So this is a hugely important part of land combat, and while it might be boring to memorize all of this stuff, like it is essential and we have to cover it. So let's start with the exceeding combat width. Now, I actually already covered this in a previous video, so I'm not gonna say much about it. I mean, this is basically a single source category, and it just depends on like how much you are, like what percentage you are exceeding the combat width in the current combat. You can see my previous combat width video for more information. Experience is also a pretty simple modifier. Like I said, green divisions have minus 25% modifier, trained divisions have 0%, regulars have plus 25%, and there are two more levels. I think it was called experienced and veteran, and which are like 50% and plus 75%. So it's basically just 25% per experience level. And it also applies like I should also say, like, some of these only attack to your attack, and some of them like apply to both, and some of them can apply to only defense or only attack. Most of the modifiers apply to both your attack and your defense / breakthrough. Now I'm saying defense / breakthrough because actually this is another one of the confusing things about like the naming conventions in the game. The defense and breakthrough are actually the same thing when you are talking about modifiers. So these if something applies to defense, it 100% applies to breakthrough. It might even say like in the UI that it's a defense modifier, but it will apply to breakthrough, as we will see later on in like when I'm talking about terrain penalties. This might be confusing, but know that like you won't be confused if you know that defense and breakthrough are the same thing when you are talking about modifiers. Now, planning and entrenchment, I could have put it as separate categories, but they can never apply at the same time because like planning only applies when you are attacking and entrenchment only applies when you're defending. So that's why I put them as the same category here. I'm sure pretty much everybody knows this, but like to build up planning, you just put the divisions on a battle plan and draw an offensive battle plan. And as long as they are not in combat or like they are stationary, they are not moving, they build up planning every day. Now I already have some previously built up. It starts from 0 normally. You know, you just keep building preparation each day until it reaches the maximum. And if you give a manual order, it decays. Okay, let's do it like this. See, like if you keep like moving it manually, it is gonna decay like pretty fast. Now this manual order decay is actually heavily reduced in most multiplayer modes, because in multiplayer you actually want people to manually micro, but I mean, for some whatever reason, Paradox wants to discourage that by giving a very fast manual order decay, which I guess is okay in single player, but I mean, most multiplayer mods will mostly remove this decay, but it still will decay like slowly when you are not stationary and building up the bonus. And Entrench is similar. I mean, you just as long as you're stationary, you build up your Entrench every day until it reaches the maximum, and you lose the Entrenchment immediately when you move the division. Okay, now let's just build up an attack. Yeah, I'm not gonna go into detail on like the modifiers on the maximum planning like the how much you gain each day and like maximum entrench etc. Because I mean these are relatively straightforward and you can figure it out yourself. Just hover over it and you'll see like all the modifiers that apply to the maximum value and the daily gain value. So yeah, I mean it's something you can figure out yourself. And let's see the attack in action. And like I said, the planning bonus when you are attacking applies both to your attack and to your breakthrough. And Poland's entrenchment bonus, which is apparently 40%, applies both to his defense and to his attack, as you see. Now, while this is not strictly attack and defense modifier related, I kind of want to mention something here due to the now that I have this setup. I've seen some streamers, even multiplayer streamers, who make the mistake of like looking at this bubble to estimate like if they are losing or winning, and they don't like open the combat window and check these values. Now this is probably why a lot of people don't have any clue what the modifiers are and like how combat mechanics work. Like in order to understand how combat works, you have to look at the combat details. I mean, this bubble doesn't really give a good indication of what's happening. Like especially when you first start the combat. Like you see, even I've passed it like 6 hours, 8 hours. It still says that we are losing, and I can guarantee you that we are not going to lose this battle. Like with these divisions. Basically, a lot. Like much of what goes into the algorithm here on whether it's red and this number here, I think this number is mostly like a comparison of the total organization in combat. So I've inflated the total organization of these divisions by using like really small width divisions, and here I have like a very artillery with low orc 40 width divisions. So basically it says like I have I mean I don't even know what this stream is like. Most of like a lot of people think it's like a 3% chance to win in your favor, but it's completely inaccurate if that's the case. And it might be that we have like 3% of the enemy org maybe, but I'm not even sure if that's correct. I would have to calculate. And this red, yellow, or green indicator is a bit better, but it's still failing at the moment. Like, but it does start becoming green like earlier than this number starts going up. Like if we run a bit more, yeah, now it turned green suddenly. I think it takes into account the damage you are dealing like over a period of time, and it actually does become accurate after a while. But I mean, if you want to immediately know like how the battle is going to turn out, just look at the combat stats. I mean, there is no reason to take these bubbles as an accurate indicator. Which, I mean, I wasn't going to mention this in this video, but I mean, it might be like one of the reasons people don't understand combat mechanics. And I've actually seen some multiplayer streamers even like make comments based on the bubble, like which were completely inaccurate. So that's why I wanted to mention, and I can show you that we will absolutely win this combat. As you see. And yeah, that's about it for the entrench and planning. Now the country category is a multi-source category, which makes it significantly more complicated than what the categories we have seen so far. So I'm gonna take some time explaining this category. Now the most common source of country modifiers come from your military staff here, and you see, for example, we have a infantry expert in our high command, which gives infantry division attack 10% and infantry division defense 15%, and we have an army offense guy that gives 10% attack. Now these stack additively, since they are both country bonuses, to give you plus 20% infantry division attack and plus 15% infantry division defense. And these categories that I'm currently covering, that you see on the UI in the combat screen, are division modifiers. So anything that I'm talking about apply to the whole division and not specific battalions. So you will ask, like, how is the division type determined? Like if I mix some other stuff into division, for example, like is this an infantry? Is this a light tank? How do I know? Basically, what you do is you click the default symbol, and the default symbol you see here is the dominant battalion in the template, and the type of the whole division. So for example, since this is a tank, the infantry division attack and defense modifiers you see here is not going to apply to this division. And you can also see here that light tanks have higher weight than infantry. So like this, although we have less light tank battalions here compared to infantry, this is a light tank division, and even this is enough to make it a light tank division actually. But if we reduce to 2, then this is an infantry division, as you see. And again, it doesn't matter that you have mixed. Basically, this infantry division attack is now going to apply to the whole division. Like I said, it's what you see in the combat. You get this soft attack and this hard attack, or whatever other value you see here in the template as base when you are attacking, and this infantry division attack is going to modify the whole division. Okay, now let us, for example, check like that I am correct in the calculation here. Basically, what we are expecting is we expect 20% attack modifier like in the country category, and we expect a 15% breakthrough modifier again in the country category. Because remember, again, when we are talking about these division attack modifier categories and defense breakthrough modifiers, defense and breakthrough are the same thing. So this 15% division defense is gonna be what you see as a breakthrough modifier here when we are attacking. And I think we have a weird width. Okay, now let's look at yeah, we have a 20% counter modifier to our attack, and we have a 50% counter modifier to our breakthrough, as I've said. Okay, now what other things I should say now? Yeah, let me talk more on how this thing you know, divisions with different battalions work. And And some divisions actually have multiple types, which might also be a source of confusion. For example, USA has a commando expert that gives you special forces attack and defense, and an infantry expert that gives you infantry division and defense. And a natural question to ask is like, what if like what happens to my marine division? Like, is it an infantry? Is it a special forces? And the answer is it is both. Special forces are both infantry and special forces. So these modifiers are actually going to stack. And you're going to get 25% attack from here, 10% attack from the army offense here, for a total of 35% attack modifier to your marines. And you're gonna get 30% defense modifier similarly to your marines. Now another country which is good for this sort of stacking is Canada. Canada has both artillery high command and then armor high command, and self-propelled guns are both artillery and tanks and armor at the same time. So these bonuses are gonna stack if your division is a self-propelled gun. Now it might be harder to achieve this because, for example, if you do a normal template, now this is the trick I wanted to show you here. If you do this sort of normal template, you see that it is an armor but not an artillery, since its type is not an SPG. However, each different type, like it's not like a tank versus SPG. Each different tank type, like light tank, heavy tank, medium tank, actually has its own pool. So if you mix up like the tank types here, you can actually make it self-propelled dominant, despite the fact that you are using the same amount of tanks. It's just you're using different type of tanks. So they each have their same pool, and since this has its own, all these four has its own pool, and these two have separate pools, like with two each, this actually becomes dominant. And I think SPGs are actually even have less weight than a single tank, because I think even 3 tanks will actually overpower 4 SPGs, but 4 SPGs overpower 2 tanks. So by using this kind of trick, you can actually make more use, get the best out of your country modifiers. But of course, I mean, there might be tech issues, and like putting heavy tanks is going to lower your speed, etc. You would have to use like multiple army XP. Like you need a lot more army XP to make your variants, etc. So this may not always be a good idea to do this, but I'm just letting you know that it is an option. Depending on what sort of build you're going for, it might be good to get the best out of your country modifier. Okay, now let's tag back. And what counts as infantry? Let me actually make a list of that. Infantry, artillery, anti-tank, anti-air, special forces, cavalry, motorized infantry, and mechanized infantry are all infantry. So if you have, again, both a cavalry and an infantry guy, you can stack. If you have both a motorized and infantry, you can stack, etc., etc. Okay. Now we have covered that part of the military stuff part of the country modifiers. Now there are other sources of country modifiers, which one of them is this here in the war support. You see this division attack and division defense on core territory modifiers that you get when you have high war support, are also country modifiers and are going to stack additively with other country modifiers. And finally, you might have a national spirit that modifies your attack. We don't have it here, but there are some national spirits that modify your attack or your breakthrough slash defense, and those are also in the country category and will stack additively with other country sources. Okay, I think this is about it for the country category. I think we've covered it in pretty well detailed. And I think I'm going to end this part of the video here because it has been pretty long. And commander skills, another multi-source and complicated category. So we should probably leave that for a separate video. And yeah, I mean, in this video we've already covered like the most fundamental parts of these division attack and defense modifiers, like how they stack with each other and how important they are. Now in the next few videos I'm just gonna go through all of the categories in detail, and at the end you will know how to be this guy that deals 17 times damage compared to somebody who doesn't know how this works. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.